Hey guys, it's Brian here, bringing you episode 64 of our Liverpool Career Mode series. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing mainly on the players that we're going to target in the off-season here. And this episode is actually specifically showing you guys what we're working with and getting your opinions on stuff before I pull the trigger. I'm not necessarily going to be doing a live stream where we only have a certain amount of people in, they give me their opinions and we go that way. I want to get as much of the kind of general thought process from as many of you as I can, and use that towards actually making decisions going into next season. So we'll start off first with what we're actually working with here. As you probably can tell by this point, we have moved on, and all our goals are the same as every other year. We got to win, 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 and win, but we have not been fired, which is the good part, right? We got £22 million there and £110,000 on the budget, which is pretty good. But the thing you got to keep in mind as well is that we're also going to be selling two key players. And these two key players we've already talked about quite a bit. And guys that we're going to move out essentially to make room for ourselves on the team and also bring in some extra money to kind of spend on the transfer market. So we got Edinson Cavani. He's 28 years old. We talked about the injuries and all that jazz. Fantastic player, but we're selling him. He's got £22.5 million on his name. And then on the other side of things here too, let me go back to the actual price points here. We got Carrillo, who's 50.5, and between those two guys, we have £38 million there. On top of the fact that we already have 22 million, so we're working with 60 million pounds to spend on these players, pretty much. I know it's not going to be exact numbers, but that's kind of what we have going for us here. And the two things that we're going to bring in is we're not going to bring in another striker because Suarez is going to play as our main striker. We might bring in like a guy that's like 75 overall, or have someone that can play the wing and then move to the striker role, but we already have players like Charlie Austin, Samad Yeşil that can play there, and I'm really expecting Suarez to take on a lot more time and not really spread the time out this time. Give him as much time in that role because he scores goals, he does a great job for us. No reason to really kind of limit him in that position. So that's what's going to be going on there. We're going to bring in a winger, a right winger to be precise, and also a midfielder. And the midfielder is just another player for us to kind of use in the midfield. We might sell someone else like Joel Allen or someone like that just to make a bit room if we want to. But Steven Gerrard retiring, I want to bring in another really big name to not necessarily replace him, but just even bulk ourselves up to another level in the middle of the field there as well. So let's go to the short list. I've narrowed this down for two specific groups, and when I say that, keep in mind that there's about 6 or 7 different names here, but these names are names that I want you to kind of think about. These are the names that I've kind of narrowed everything down to, and you can leave your responses in the comment section below with likes to the certain names, because what I'll do is for every single player listed here, there'll be their name in the comment section, and you can give it either a like or a dislike if you want to see them on the team. And for the 2 spots that we're going for, their names, whoever in those 2 spots has the highest like is going to probably be the player we bring in. I'll have some discretion if I really want to go with one over the other, but I'm giving it up to you guys, kind of help me out making the decision process go here. So first off, we're going to start with the wingers, and Sebastian Giovinco is an option for the winger role because, as you can see right here, he can play a whole whack load of different positions. He's got a good weak foot, which is really important to me. I don't necessarily use the skill moves as much, but that's very important. Good work rate. And overall, he looks like a very good winger to have with some actual scoring abilities as well. He's 28 years old, which is the only negative, but I think he could be a very solid player for us to bring in. So £13 million there. Pretty easy. We could just pretty much go straight across for Carrillo or something like that on a deal there. Then we got a couple other names here, just so you guys know. We have Yassine Benzia and Delafeu along with Weiser, who are 3 guys that don't really fall into this category. They are lesser names, but names that I will, if we have some extra money, I want to bring Weiser back. If we have some extra money, I might bring Delafeu back. Those are just kind of like in their own categories. So we'll say it's the 3rd category between Delafeu, Weiser, and Yassine Benzia. These are players that we could bring in just to have like one of them as the younger guy that can get into the sub spot, that plays some games from time to time, but not a whole lot overall. But the big names, so we got up there Giovinco, and then we have Eduardo Salvio, who's a player that can play in the right wing role, and you can see from his stats again. I don't need to open it up or anything there, Well, actually, let's take a look at his abilities here, and also, strong, not too strong of a weak foot, can play the right wing is what we want from him. 24 years old. He looks very solid in a lot of ways. He has what I like out of a winger, that pace. He's actually got the ability to shoot as well, but he's got that good crossing ability. And, I like to, in ways, dribble the player on the wing. That's important to me. So he's got a lot of those key features that I think are pretty good. Isla is the next player here, 27 years old, a little bit older, but probably one of the best players you can get as a midfielder on the wings. And he does not actually have the alternate position of right wing, but I could definitely play him in that role. I don't think he'd be too upset with that. A little bit more just kind of across the board, evened out, but still a very strong player and can play in the midfield too. So that's another positive for him. Then we got Theo Walcott, who has an interesting kind of thing about him. The fact that obviously he's an English player, which is something that might interest a lot of you. I think that he is a name that is a little bit more used than other players, which actually is a bit of a turnoff to me. But the positive that he does have is that he can play right wing and he can also play in the striking role, which means that if we needed to, if Suarez was injured or we wanted to have Suarez out for a game, we actually have a very capable striker to come in and do that. But he can play on the wings as well. Super speedy. You all know what he's about. So there's that there. And then the name that actually I thought was an interesting one that I'm actually very interested in bringing in, because he is a striker similar to Theo Walcott, but he also has the alternate position of playing as a right winger. He's got low defensive work rate, but I actually don't mind that in wingers that are up in the attacking roles, because they don't need to come back for me anyway. An amazing weak foot, which is really important. Really strong speed and good sprint speed there. Besides from that, you can see that he's got some very solid skills, and because he is a striker, he's got striking ability as well. I think that his actual ability to cross is probably the most, well, it's the negative out of everything that he has to bring to the table. But at the same time, too, he could very well be a strong winger for us to bring in. So those are the winger options there. Let me know in the comments. As I said, I'll have ones for every single one of these guys. You can let me know, and there'll be 3 separate categories there. And then we have the midfielder, which is going to be a midfielder that can play multiple different roles. A midfielder that can play as a center mid, as a defensive mid potentially, and even in the odd case could, go upfield in the times that we need him up there. So we got some really big names here. We got some smaller names as well, and it really depends on. I think that what we need the most is just a midfielder, a straight up midfielder that can play in the midfield role. So some of these names I think are a little out of place, but I also wanted to put them into the mix here too, because I thought some of them would be interesting to bring in the squad, and we can kind of play around with it too if we did bring in, some of these players versus other guys. So we have Oscar. I'm getting more and more interested in the fact of kind of like weakening other squads while bringing in players. But if we brought in him, we'd have to sell Cavani, which is kind of like it's not the best trade, giving Cavani to Chelsea there, but he's a very solid midfielder. I'm not too sure how well he's been, or how many people have actually used him in other career modes, but he fits really well into what I'm interested in. The only thing is he actually doesn't have center mid as one of his alternate positions, but we could definitely play him there. The one that is a little bit, I don't know, probably not going to happen, but I'm putting the name out there regardless. Mario Götze, he's a player that obviously is now in Bayern Munich, but in my career mode he's still, or if Borussia Dortmund, we could bring him in. Probably be a really fantastic player to have in the midfield. He can play on the wings as well. Lots of options for him, but he is £30 million to get over here, so that would probably take a little bit more finagling to get him in. Coutinho, obviously a player that actually has been transferred to Liverpool, so there's some love for that there, but also probably other series have brought him into Liverpool after the fact, so that's a little bit of a turn-off for me in a way, but I would be interested in bringing him in because of the fact that he actually is a Liverpool player now, and probably that'd be of interest to you guys as well, but that's another name there too. Only problem with him is that he actually doesn't have the midfield as one of his options, but again, we can kind of live with that. Also can play the wings too, which is nice to see from him. Then we get into, I think, the players that really signify maybe a better option for us in a way. And I put time into finding these guys. I feel like these are very solid choices for us, and some very great players that we could have just kind of really bolster our midfield. So I'm gonna butcher some of these names. I know that for a fact. Here we go. Afriaqua is a player that we could bring in. And I like what he has. He's not as flary as some of the other players, but I really just want a midfield player. So I actually am, hesitant to bring in one of those attacking midfielders. And I actually want you guys to keep that in mind when you're making your decisions. They're not as important to me because of the fact that they don't really fit the role as much as I want to bring in. I will actually balance the likes a little bit to that too, unless you guys really, really want to see one of those players brought in. So he seems like a very solid player to have, just kind of that presence. He can even play as a defensive mid, and has good work rate, good weak foot. Seems like a player that would definitely work out on the team. Then we have Quado Asamoah. He was I don't know. He's still pretty young, but he's a pretty fantastic player, and he might actually be the one that I'm most interested in bringing in. You can see he has a great ability to take those long shots, which is something that I really enjoy doing. Has very solid shot power as well. And just can play all over the place if we need him to be. Great work rate. Doesn't have as good of a weak foot, but still, hey, he looks like a very, very solid player. And him or Claudio Marchisio had that type of... They're both from Juventus, and just very solid midfielders there. Then there's Jack Wilshere, the quintessential... You want one of the best midfielders in the game, you bring in Jack Wilshere, and he's a name that we could definitely bring in and make happen. We'd have to sell Cavani pretty much straight up, so Arsenal will get Cavani for Wilshere, but that's a trade I'm willing to make. He's more of a defensive midfielder, I think, in a lot of ways, but I still think that he'd be a fantastic acquisition for us. Has, again, all those traits we really want to have, a very young player, and English as well. The only thing I would say is he is injury prone, but comparatively his specialties, he's a complete midfielder. He's one of the few players like that in the game. Then we get to the last two here. Moussa Sissoko. Someone that is not as highly rated as the other guys, so it'd be a little bit less to bring him in. But we'd be selling Cavani or whatever and money to a team. Or actually, you know what? We probably would just do a trade where we wouldn't have to even involve Cavani to bring him in. So he's a little bit on the lesser side, but I think he's a very solid player nonetheless. And just well-rounded across the board, which is not a terrible thing to have at all. His weak foot is a little weak. He's not going to be able to score as many goals. But can play defensive mid, can play center mid. Very strong there. And Claudio Marchisio as well. The guy that we've already looked at in the past. He's someone that I think would be fantastic to bring in. But he is 29 now, so he's getting up there in age. So we bring in a player that would be kind of degrading pretty quickly. But the thing we need to keep in mind is there's only 2 more seasons left. So you'll be 31 by the end of it all, which isn't too bad. So with that said, you know what, guys? I hate to do this to you, but we're taking... he's injured for 3 months as well. We don't want Oscar. We don't want Götze. So the names here that will be used are of these guys right here. Let me know 3 different spots to be filled. We got the money. We got the players to trade as well. And any money that we have left over we'll use for scouting too. That's pretty much it for this episode. A very quick one. I want to get it out to you guys. Let me know in the responses, and we'll get around to doing the actual transfer preseason episode pretty soon. Cheers.